You've been trying so hard to hold it all together. The plans, the outcomes, the version of life you decided should exist. And still, something feels off. Like the harder you grip, the more slips through. Those efforts never feel like enough, do they? The Buddha saw this exhaustion clearly, long before the modern world made it worse. He had one quiet answer for the person who strives and strains and still feels empty. Today's teaching is that answer, and it might be simpler than anything you've tried before. In northern India, on the banks of the Ganges River, there stood a single tree. This was about 2,500 years ago. The dry season was drawing to a close. The air was still parched, but at night, the earth would grow quietly cold. At the base of that tree sat a young man. His name was Gautama Siddhartha. Born into a royal family, he had given up everything and walked away from home. There was almost no wind. A leaf trembled, faintly. The sound of insects drifted in from somewhere far away. That was all the night offered. Gautama sat with his eyes closed. There was no urgency in his face. 6 years of extreme asceticism had left his body little more than bone and skin. And yet, something in the air that night was different. Something quiet and extraordinary was settling in. Dawn was still hours away, when a single star appeared on the horizon. Not brighter than usual, not announcing itself in any particular way, simply there, as it had always been. And in that moment, something that had been searching for 10,000 lifetimes finally stopped. Not with triumph, not with relief, simply the way a river after a long journey meets the sea and no longer needs to call itself a river. Gautama had come to rest beneath that tree at the end of a very long journey. Raised in comfort and privilege, he had carried one question from his earliest years. Why do people grow old? Why do they fall ill? Why do they die? And why does the suffering that comes with what cannot be avoided cut so unbearably deep? To find the answer, he left his palace. He left behind his wife, his infant child, his place in the royal line. For 6 years, he pushed himself through extraordinary hardship, fasting, self-mortification, driving himself to the very edge of existence. And still, no answer came. Then one day, a young woman named Sujata offered him a bowl of rice porridge. After 6 years, Gautama accepted it and ate. A simple, ordinary act of receiving nourishment. The 5 companions who had practiced alongside him watched in contempt. Gautama has given up, they said, and left. He was alone, and so he came to this tree, the tree that would later be called the Bodhi tree, the tree of awakening. Before sitting down, he made a single vow: I will not rise from this seat until I have understood. But what he did that night was not striving. He simply sat. He felt his breath. Each time his awareness drifted, he gently returned to this moment. It wasn't that he stopped wanting. It was more that he watched even the part of himself that wanted, with quiet, open eyes. The night deepened. The ancient texts say that Mara, the demon of delusion, came to him. Temptation came, fear came, doubt came. A voice came asking, "What right do you have to awakening?" Gautama did not resist it. He did not fight it. He simply watched what came as it came, and then he reached down and touched the earth with his right hand. "Let this earth be my witness," he said. In the darkness before dawn, something shifted. Perhaps it wasn't dramatic. Perhaps no light poured down. Or perhaps it did. But whatever Gautama spoke of afterward always had a quality of stillness at its center. "I saw it," he said. He saw the structure of suffering, why it arises, what keeps it going, where to look, to be free from its chain. Dawn came. Gautama the seeker became the Buddha, the awakened one. Among what he discovered that night was a teaching known as the 4 bases of power. It held within it a structure, how deep stillness and concentration could transform human perception at its very root. And at the heart of that structure lay something almost embarrassingly simple. The same quiet returning he had practiced through the long hours of that night, again and again, each time his mind wandered toward Mara's voices, or the ache in his legs, or the memory of his sleeping child. Not a grand technique, not a secret doctrine, just this breath, this moment, this ground beneath his hand. The earth had been his witness, but perhaps the earth was also his teacher. That same ground is beneath your feet right now. Not metaphorically, literally, the floor you are sitting on, the weight of your body pressing down, this moment holding you just as it held him. So what are the 4 bases of power? The name sounds complex, but at its heart, it's something very simple. Deep concentration, a still, focused state of mind, opens up the deepest possibilities within a person, and there are 4 foundations on which that concentration grows. Those 4 are intention, the heart that wants; effort, the heart that tries; mind, the mind itself; and discernment, the heart that observes. When these 4 come together, they become the ground from which deep, quiet concentration, what Buddhism calls samadhi, naturally arises. But pause here for a moment. Most of us assume that focusing and forcing are the same thing. Push harder and concentration deepens, try more and clarity comes. But what Gautama discovered beneath the Bodhi tree was precisely the opposite. True concentration doesn't live at the end of force. Why is it that we can't focus? Why does the mind scatter so easily? Many of us answer, because I have no willpower, or because the conditions aren't right. But Buddhism sees it a little differently. The mind doesn't scatter because your will is weak. It scatters because somewhere inside, something is fixed to how things should be, and the mind keeps pulling toward that fixed point. When regret from the past takes over your mind, it's because something in you holds firm to that could have gone differently. When anxiety about the future won't stop, it's because a version of how things should turn out is trembling. The mind that cannot rest in this moment is a mind that is tethered, not to this moment, but to what it believes should be true. What Gautama learned through 6 years of asceticism was this: asceticism cannot cut that tether. In a sense, severe self-denial is one of the most tightly gripped expressions of this is how it should be. The belief that you can force your way to awakening was the very thing holding him back. You cannot untie a knot by fighting it. Only when you see the knot, really see it, does it begin to loosen. Now, one more question. Is there really such a thing as a self who is concentrating? We say, I am trying to focus. We treat concentration as an act of will, something we do. But from a Buddhist perspective, that framing is slightly off. Concentration is not something you do, it's something that arises. When the conditions are right, it simply appears on its own. Think of a moment when you were deeply absorbed in something, the light of dusk that stopped your breath, a piece of music that pulled you in completely, the face of a child, laughing. Were you trying to concentrate in those moments? No, you simply found yourself there. It wasn't I concentrated, it was concentration appeared, and I was in it. The 4 bases of power point to the conditions that allow this to happen, when intention, effort, mind, and discernment come together quietly. Concentration arises naturally, on its own. Perhaps Gautama didn't sit beneath the Bodhi tree to capture awakening. Perhaps he simply sat, released from seeking, and something opened in that release. That is the quiet paradox at the heart of this teaching. And yet, we are not asked to do nothing. A lamp does not force its light into the room, but someone must first trim the wick, pour the oil, and set it in a place where the wind will not reach it. Those 4 acts, trimming, pouring, placing, are the 4 bases of power, not the flame itself, but the quiet tending that makes the flame possible. Intention chooses the spot, effort pours the oil, mind holds the lamp steady, and discernment watches, without grasping, for the moment the light takes hold on its own. This teaching isn't a relic from a distant past. It lands directly, right here, in the middle of our ordinary lives. For the person who is gripping too hard at work, the deadline is closing in, but your mind won't move. The more you push, the further the words stay. The ideas won't come. You've probably been here. The instinct in those moments is to try harder, force more. But the harder you press, the more your mind turns toward the self that isn't performing, and the further it drifts from the work right in front of you. The 4 bases of power point in the opposite direction. Stop. Just for a moment. One breath. Loosen just slightly the grip of, this should be going better. And bring your attention back to the single word in front of you. The one sentence. This moment only. Concentration isn't something you chase down, it's something you come back to. Not by reaching outward intention, but by returning again and again to here. That's where depth lives. For the person worn down by relationships, What must they think of me? Did I say the wrong thing? I should have said it differently. Long after a conversation ends, the replay keeps running. This too is the mind caught on a fixed point. The self I should be, the impression I should have made, pulling awareness backward into the past. When attention is trapped in yesterday's exchange, you stop hearing the person in front of you today. You stop seeing their face. The painful irony is that the harder you try to get it right, the less you are actually present. And people feel that absence. They sense the distance. Deep concentration here means something like quiet attention turned toward this person now, simply listening to what they are saying in this moment. That small shift can change the texture of a relationship. For the person who starts things but can't keep going, you want to meditate, to exercise, to learn something, but 3 days in, it's gone. A week later, forgotten, and you conclude, I'm just not someone who can stick with things. But let me gently ask, is the self who can't continue actually a fixed, permanent truth? Or is it that you hold a fixed ideal, I should do this perfectly every day, and every time you fall short of that ideal, you relabel yourself as someone who fails? The intention in the 4 bases of power isn't a blazing fire of motivation. It's quieter than that, a gentle orientation, a direction you face, not a flame that burns bright and burns out, but a lantern flame, small, steady, simply there, keeping that small direction alive, without demanding perfection of it. That is where everything begins. When you miss a day, you don't rebuild the lantern from scratch. You simply cup your hands around what's still flickering, and continue. And sometimes that looks like nothing more than sitting down on the cushion again, even while part of you is still arguing that it's pointless. So what can you do, starting today? Just one suggestion. Tonight before you sleep, try sitting for 3 minutes. That's all. You don't need to achieve anything. You don't need to check whether you're doing it right. Just sit, in a chair or on the floor. Lengthen your spine gently, close your eyes, and feel your breath. Breath coming in, breath going out. Just that. When your mind drifts to something else, and it will, that's fine. The moment you notice, you're already back. You don't need to scold yourself. The noticing is the return. What Gautama did beneath the Bodhi tree wasn't so different from this at its core. Not going somewhere, just returning. Here, now, again and again. And in that returning, something quietly deepens. The Buddha's early disciples practiced something called kinhin, walking meditation. With each step they simply felt the sole of the foot meeting the ground, nothing more. Walking and returning to now. If sitting feels hard, try this tomorrow morning. From the moment you leave your home until you arrive at work or school, put your phone in your pocket and just walk. Feel your feet, feel the ground. Let your awareness rest there, gently, for a few minutes. Will this change your life? Honestly, I can't promise that. 3 minutes of sitting won't remake you overnight. But the way you see things, that may begin to shift quietly over time. That is the modest, honest promise this teaching makes. A woman once told me that after 2 weeks of her morning walk, she noticed, for the first time, a small tree growing between the pavement cracks outside her office building. It had probably been there for years. She stopped, looked at it, and felt something she couldn't quite name. Not joy exactly, but something closer to recognition. That tree hadn't changed. She had simply, finally, arrived where she was. And perhaps that is enough. To arrive, again and again, in the ordinary places we have always been. The cracked pavement, the morning light on a familiar wall, the breath, moving in and out, whether we notice it or not. A monk was once asked how long he had been practicing, and he smiled and said, about 10 seconds. He meant this moment, and this one, and this one, each a beginning, none of them wasted. Before we close, just one question, and there's no need to answer it now. What is the one thing you are gripping most tightly right now? The thing you keep telling yourself must be this way. Take your time. Don't rush toward an answer. But if something rose to the surface while you were listening today, just let yourself look at it, quietly, for a little while. A monk once said that the fist does not know it is closed until it tries to receive something. Perhaps simply naming what you are holding is enough for today. Not to drop it, not yet, but just to feel its weight in your hand. And sometimes that is all it takes. One honest moment of feeling the strain across your knuckles, the quiet ache you had grown so used to that you forgot it was there. A traveler who has carried a stone in his shoe for many miles does not need to be told it is heavy. He only needs to stop walking long enough to notice. So stop, just for now, and let yourself notice. After the dawn came beneath the Bodhi tree, Gautama didn't leap to his feet and rush off to do something. The texts tell us he simply stayed there, sitting for a while longer. Even after awakening, he was unhurried. Nothing pressed. The stillness held. And from within that stillness, he eventually rose and walked, back to the 5 companions who had left him. The first teaching began, and what started there has been carried forward quietly for thousands of years. A heart that stopped straining, and from that, a world began to move. I don't think this is a story that belongs only to someone remarkable in a time long gone. Loosening the grip, just a little. Releasing, just slightly, the fixed idea of how things must be. Coming back to here. That small movement can change something. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. I hope that tonight you find at least one moment to breathe, slowly, gently, just as you are. And if you forget, and the grip tightens again, that too is fine. Simply notice it, the way you might notice a hand clenched around nothing. The opening can always begin again. And perhaps that is enough. Not the grand release, but the small one, found in a Tuesday kitchen or on a crowded train, or just before sleep, when the day finally stops asking things of you. Whose face came to mind while you were listening today? One story a day. In a week, your words will change. In a month, your eyes will change. In a year, the same world will look completely different.